Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm bringing you a review for the brand new Transformers Studio Series 86 Autobot Jazz. Jazz is number 1 within the 86 subline of Studio Series, and he's an all-new Deluxe class mold that is meant specifically to depict Jazz in his appearance from the 1986 movie. I know after the Power of the Primes toy, a lot of people were clamoring for a newer, more proper Jazz toy that wasn't compromised by any sort of combiner gimmick. So at long last, Hasbro has kind of answered that call. So if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Jazz's packaging, then we'll open it up, we'll see Jazz's instructions, we'll take a look at his backdrop at some point, and then we'll see Jazz himself in both his vehicle and robot modes. Naturally, I'll do some group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Jazz comes in your standard Deluxe Class Studio Series packaging. Get a big front window here, we can see the toy. Get this nice bit of artwork right there. Get the movie call out, his number, name, all that fun stuff. Turn it to the side, you get a close-up of his face. And back here you get renders of the toy in both vehicle and robot modes. Takes 20 steps to transform, so not too simple, not too complicated. He comes with the Moonbase 1 Destruction backdrop, so that's pretty cool. And his flavor text here says, Autobot Jazz makes a futile escape as Unicron devours Moonbase 1. So whenever they actually finally release that Unicron toy, you can reenact that if you want to. And then on this side, you just get a full body shot of Jazz's artwork. Okay, here we get the instruction book for Jazz. You can see it's got the name, movie, branding, number, all that. Nice render of him on the front. This first bit just shows you how to kind of get his backpack all tucked in from the packaging. Hide those little door wings. And then here you get the transformation from robot to vehicle, which wraps around the back here. Like so. Shows you how to store his weapon on top. And then this shows you how to have him either store his gun on his back or hold it in his hand. And then lastly, you get cross cells for his wave mates. You get Cup, which is number 2, and then Blur, which is number 3. And now we get to see Jazz's car mode. And this thing, for the most part, looks very nice. It's got not the exact racing stripes that you'd expect, but kind of a simplified version. You know, red in the middle, blue on the sides, Autobot symbol on the front, painted grille, painted headlights, little red stripe around the front. It's a good touch, nice attention to detail. He has painted rims, but unfortunately he gets the peg through the front wheels, so God, I wish they'd stop doing that. Please. His windshield and windows and all that, they're done in a slightly blue transparent plastic, which looks very nice. Now we get to probably the worst part of this, the feet. Like, they're just hanging out the back there. And, you know, if you squint, they kind of look like a bumper, but they're sticking way too far out. I know a lot of people really dislike that about this. Kind of has the same issue as like the Siege Ironhide mold, right? They just didn't know where to stick the feet, so they're just hanging off the back, which is a shame. Underside is fairly clean. You can see the top of his head, but it's not that noticeable. It's done up in a black color, so. And then the shin plates and all that, they just kind of look like, you know, the under part of a car. Now, one thing that's interesting is the numbering on the side here. They use the number 14. And anyone familiar with Jazz knows he typically has the number 4 written on his doors because that's what they used for the original toy. Now, apparently the reason for the change is to avoid licensing issues, especially because Porsche hasn't really been playing very nice with, you know, the Transformers brand lately, which is why we haven't seen things like a Masterpiece Jazz. So they've had to change a lot. That's why you notice the car itself doesn't look like the old Porsche car. They've really had to go out of their way to not run afoul of Porsche's hang up with, I don't know, licensing out toys. I don't know what their deal is. But the number 14 isn't just, you know, made up from nowhere. It's actually a reference to kind of two things. I'm not sure which one is the intentional reference, maybe both. One is his Diaclone counterpart, which was called number 14. And then he was also the 14th toy listed in like the initial catalog. Now that one's a little more obscure. I'm leaning more toward the Diaclone explanation. It's the most likely thing. So it's a good way of making it very similar to the old number and also referencing the toy's origins. Of course, here you can see he's got his blaster mounted on the roof, which he has just a straight hole in the roof, which is not something you see often, right? It's usually just kind of an indentation, but now this goes all the way through, which I guess, given how thin this piece is, makes sense. And the blaster is done up very much in the style of his cartoon gun. It's very nice silver paint on it. I think it's the same they use on the rims and the feet there. A little shinier than the feet. I don't know. Might just be the plastic difference. And yeah, it just plugs in there pretty nicely. You can always choose to take it off if you wish. Of course, then he's got a big old hole in the roof. Not really anywhere else to store it in the vehicle mode, which is kind of unusual for a modern toy, but it works well enough. And as far as rolling, this guy rolls very, very smoothly. So overall, I'm very satisfied with the vehicle mode. Yeah, the foot bumper thing is a bit of a bummer, but it's far from a deal breaker for me. I just love the way this thing turned out. I like the really cool flared spoiler he's got on the back there. Overall, he does it for me. I like him. Here I have a comparison with, sadly, the only other G1 Jazz that I own, and this is the Power of the Primes version. I don't have that really awesome, was it Reveal the Shield version? Or Hunt for the Decepticons? One of those. During that era, right? I do have his Shattered Glass Stepper redeco, but I don't think he's worth comparing. He's like orange and just, yeah. So this is an interesting comparison. You can see there's a marked difference in the size of these guys. And that's kind of a function of two things. One, just the general downsizing of toys since the War for Seibertron trilogy started. And also the fact that Combiner Wars style limbots just tended to be pretty big because they all had to reach a universal size to work as limbs, right? You can't have one arm or one leg shorter than the other. So that does make this Jazz pretty long. Now, some things really worth pointing out is that the Power of the Primes Jazz definitely takes more cues from the G1 toy. In fact, he has the Martini racing stripes, or, a close approximation of them, and he's got the number 4 on the doors and the hood and everything. So apparently they weren't very afraid of Porsche when they made this guy. I don't know what changed in the meantime, of just different mentality of the design team or legal team, or maybe Porsche just cracked down harder, I don't know. But overall, this is actually a very solid vehicle mode as well, and is a lot closer to the original car's design, just with kind of some futuristic details thrown on. And they're both pretty neat in their own right. You can see that the gun they come with, both based on the same overall design with that kind of long, wide muzzle thing going on. And of course, this guy comes with his little prime armor piece that makes for a nice little kind of rocket booster on the back. So yeah, not one that's really better or worse, just two different takes on the vehicle mode. Okay, now it's time to transform Jazz. If you haven't already, remove his weapon from his hood. And we're going to lift his little door sections up, like so. And we're going to carefully wriggle his little top shell free. I say carefully because it's all clear plastic. You don't want to crack it or anything. Usually you get the back up first, followed by the front section. Come on, little fella. Come on, little guy. There you go. All right. Be very gentle. You just kind of want to swing that back and out of the way. And we're going to swing his arms out like so. Come out like that. Flip his fist down. Position the arms correctly. And he's got this little abdominal section here that you're going to spin around without actually turning his waist to get his abs just kind of facing forward. Tab his feet. And you're going to swing them down. They don't really, well, they kind of tab into place. Yeah, right here. So there's tab, little slot. So just kind of push it in until you feel it. Same thing here. Nice and solid. Flip the feet down. Swing his rear tires down to match his cartoon appearance. All right. And then you're going to take this little middle hood section, you're going to push it all the way up to swing his robot head out. Might need to bend this down a bit to get the clearance. So you do that, and you swing this down a little bit so that it will have these slots go over these tabs, form the connection from the car hood down to the ab section. All right, and we are going to swing this section in. It'll let me. Come on. And then swing the doors in, like so. Swing everything down. There you got his nice little compact backpack. It looks really good. Not quite as flush as his animation model, but close to it. I gotta say, I like it. And that hinge there kind of covers up the gaping hole in the back. Doesn't just shine right through. All right, so here we go. This is Studio Series Jazz. He looks phenomenal. Looks very, very close to his cartoon model, and he's just a very nice, streamlined robot. He manages to, tuck away all of his car kibble very well. Now, as far as his weapon, you can store it on his back, utilizing one of the little side pegs here, which not super necessary, but at least it makes it kind of nice and flush. So you can do that, or maybe position it like this or something. Or you can just have him wield it in his hand. So there you go. And he looks awesome. He looks absolutely ready to go. I love this. Now when it comes to his articulation, you can see he's got a ball jointed head, which is pretty standard. He's got the universal joints on the shoulders. It's very nice. And kind of get some added shoulder articulation because those panels are on, can swing around a little bit. Got the bicep swivel, single bend elbows. No wrist swivel, sadly, because they flip out. It's rare that you get flip out wrists that actually have swivel on them. Gets a full waist articulation, and luckily his backpack can just kind of freely swing up enough to enable that. He's got the universal hips, thigh swivel, just fairly tight, but not too tight. Single bend knees, though you can kind of cheat it if you untab the knees. And then he's got ankle tilt. So he's a very, very posable little Autobot. And I say little because, yeah, Jazz is quite small. Like, even though, he's very small for Deluxe, it's fitting because Jazz's character was always a fairly small bot. And for another comparison, here's the Power of the Primes Jazz yet again. And you can see they both have the same general motifs, but the Power of the Primes toy just ends up being very tall and very wide and bulky looking. In fact, he looks a lot more like his 2015 Robots in Disguise incarnation than he does the G1 Jazz, with very wide shoulders, kind of muscular looking. So, compromises were made to make this guy a combiner limb, and that's why a lot of people really didn't like it. And I know I bashed this guy pretty hard during my review of him. Not so much because of the proportions, because I didn't really have anything to compare him to. More so just kind of the general plainness of his look. And the one thing that always bothered me and still does is he's got these panels behind his wrists that don't fold away. But he has articulated wrists that you can't use because of the panels. So, because they didn't feel like putting like a little hinge here or something, he ends up having pointless articulation that you can't utilize. So, definitely not the most well-executed figure out there. But he's not terrible, right? He serves his purpose as a popular character who is now retrofitted with combiner technology. And for that, I think he's fine. And, you can still buy this guy and just use him as a combiner limb, and then have this Jazz for your standalone bot. It's kind of how I look at, like the Combiner Wars, Ironhide, and Hound, and all of them, right? They're just meant to be limbs because they kind of fail at being individual bots. But yeah, if you are purely just looking for a good representation of G1 Jazz, this is your guy. You can go ahead, sell this off if you don't want to use him as a combiner part, and just keep this one because this dude is pretty much everything you could ask for a solid representation of his cartoon model. Now, I know a lot of people really like the Reveal the Shield or Generations type Jazz, and for good reason. That is a fantastic toy, and it takes more cues from his original toy, having like the car wings and everything. And I think there's no reason you can't have room for both of them in your collection. But going by modern standards, that guy is very tall and pretty grossly out of scale. So if you're looking for something to go with your War for Cybertron stuff, this guy's going to be a better fit. Now here's our look at the backdrop for Moonbase 1. You can see it's very cool. You got Jazz's little like communications console here, some other little bit of consoles there. Something in the background. I don't know if that's supposed to be Seibertron or Moonbase 2. Not entirely sure. And you kind of see this little alcove here, like some kind of storage, so that's a neat touch. So naturally, you can get Jazz up on here, kind of manning his station. Or if you don't want him to be lonely, you can go ahead and put him with his co-worker here, Cliff Jumper. So now you get both denizens of Moonbase 1. And yeah, it makes for a really neat little scene. You can kind of enact the final desperate moments of Moonbase 1 as they're trying to reach out to Moonbase 2 and warn them about Unicron's impending approach. And luckily, because neither of these guys are very big, there is plenty of room on the platform for the both of them. So works out for the little guys. I do also want to point out my annoyance that you can see there's some damage right here, and unfortunately that's just from the way somebody packaged it inside the box, so nothing I can do about that. But yeah, it's a very nice backdrop, very vivid. You can see a lot of detail on it, so it just really helps complete the whole package that is Jazz. Alright, and I think with that we can wrap up this review. My final thoughts on this guy, I think he's fantastic. I think he does everything right. He has a really cool looking car mode. Even if it's not, you know, the Porsche, it's still a good looking car mode. Albeit with a pretty hefty bumper. And then the robot mode is just immaculate. I love the way he looks. He's so streamlined. He doesn't have a ton of cable hanging off the back. I think he looks great. There are some minor grievances I have. Like, I do wish his thighs were a little fuller on the inside, but, you know, that's just pretty standard by now. And it would have been nice if they engineered a wrist swivel into this, but again, not a huge deal breaker. He's got most of the articulation you'd want. And because Jazz is a character that only gets a new toy every so often, if you don't already have a version of this guy, this may be your only chance to pick him up for quite a while. So I think he's completely worth the money. It's the best cartoon representation of the character we've ever received. His backdrop is great. His little gun is very, very cool. So yeah, if you don't already have him, I would say pick him up. Honestly, even if you have another version of him, I'd still pick him up, because again, he is the only cartoon Jazz we've ever really received. And him being number 1 in the Studio Series 86 toy line puts things off to a good start. Of course, that is just how I feel about this new Jazz. Now I want to know what you all think. Are you just as impressed by this guy as I am, or do you have some more nitpicks with him that maybe kind of turns you off to the toy? Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let you two know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers Studio Series 86 Jazz. And with all that said, I will see you next time.